And all right, thank you everybody once again for coming. My name is Kobe Sconnard. I am one of the co-founders and the CEO at Ideawake. And today we have a really awesome pleasure of engaging with Aslinn Merriman, who we're going to introduce in just a minute. But what we're going to be going through today is how Sargento built a culture of innovation through their emerging technology program. And our speakers for today, really the main speaker is Aslinn Merriman. She's the emerging technology architect at Sargento. She's waving to everyone now. And what Aslinn does at Sargento is she oversees the strategic execution of exploratory projects related to digitization of innovation. So really, she's monitoring the proof of concepts from taking ideas all the way through to that proof of concept phase, and then ensuring that the new ideas that are being implemented at Sargento are feasible and that they can scale. And once again, it's through the lens of emerging technology. I already introduced myself before, but my name is Kobe Sconnard. I am one of the co-founders and the CEO at Ideawake, and looking forward to sharing the story of Sargento with you today. Going through the agenda, what we're gonna start is just the inception of Sargento's emerging technology program. Then we're going to dive really deep into the process, not just from a high-level strategy standpoint, which is important, but really to the tactical execution of how these programs are done. And Aslinn has a wealth of experience in this area and has been very successful with it. Then we're going to go to some of the results that they've achieved and plans for Sargento going forward with their emerging technology program. And then finally end with obstacles, lessons learned, and leaving you with some actionable advice that you can take to start building a culture of innovation within your organization. We'll end it with questions and answers. And if you do have a question throughout the session, please do feel free to raise your hand. It's going to be at the bottom section of your panel in Zoom. So you can raise your hand at any time during the session, ask a question, and we will get to it right at the end of the session. So without further ado, Aslinn, welcome.
Hi.
And really excited to have you here today. And just really from the inception, from the start, what made Sargento decide that building an emerging technology program was important?
I think when I talk about the emerging tech program and I go around Sargento, I make sure to let them know a few things kind of top of mind, is that it was a deliberate decision to take ideas forward and experiment with them. There are a lot of things coming at the company that are disruptive in nature, possibly, and they wanted to experiment with some of these really big, audacious goals that are possibly on a risk register a little higher. And so taking the risk down into the lower areas so that people could find out what experimentation could do in order to make better decisions in the future.
That's awesome. And just for, I'm sure a lot of the folks in this meeting know, but if you could just give a little bit of background on Sargento too. Company has a rich history, but just what you do and why, kind of leading up to the first answer you gave, why it was so awesome to see this program get started at Sargento.
Actually, a really good point, Kobe. If I take it back to 1953, which is when Sargento was founded, they were founded in Plymouth, Wisconsin, by an entrepreneur from the Gentine family, and they decided that they wanted to take cheese and convert cheese into sliced shred stick and other things. So over the course of time, the company has many roots in entrepreneurship and innovation. They have many different types of innovations that they've been known for. So like the zipper on your resealable bags and things like that, the hooks that go into the storage cases, the cooler cases of in stores and grocery stores that you see. Those are things that came from Sargento, and we're very proud of that. There's actually a book that you can read about the history and the real story called Treated Like Family. The tagline at Sargento is hire good people and treat them like family, which is very true. It's a very integrated part of the culture. And if you fast forward, there has been a lot of innovation, but as companies grow, they become ingrained in processes and procedures and things of that sort, as all companies do when they grow. One point is that our technology group within the organization grew to be about a little over 50 people. And I think that was when they realized that some of these technologies were very disruptive. And that's where the emerging technology came into play around 2018. So late 2018 is when the emerging technology program was born. And one of the very first things that they did was an innovation challenge to get the program started. So a lot of the successes that we've seen have been born out of that innovation challenge and have continued to grow and continue to help grow the program as a whole.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Thank you for that. I'm really glad that we got that context in there up front too. So we touched on this a little bit already, Aslinn, but looking at the actual, like the specific goals, right? There was the why behind the program at a high level, but looking at the outset, what the goals were for the emerging tech program. And then also, it's been live for a few years now, but looking at whether those goals have changed or you plan on them changing in the future.
I think that there are just two different levels of thinking. Like one is the very tactical, like what do we do on a day-to-day basis? And then there's the extra level of thinking, like the strategic. And I think that when the intent of forming the emerging technology program, I have great leadership, and the director and VP of IT were definitely in alignment with making sure that there were sustainable goals throughout time. And I think that they'll be long lasting. Did you want me to go through some of those, like maybe some principles and goals of the program?
That would be great.
Yeah. So some of the overall purpose of the emerging technology program is to inspire new and different types of thinking around technology to rapidly innovate. So when you say rapidly innovate, it means that test, iterate, learn type of reproduction of experiential learning. Some of the things that I try to strive for, or the program really strives for, is making sure that you're quick to fail, but quick to market. Thinking big, but starting small. I'm always asked, what is that next step that you can take in order to learn or to experiment? Keep it simple. Don't make things overcomplicated, because if you do, then sometimes you get that hesitancy to not take a step forward. And the ideas are always everywhere. There's ideas that can be taken from anywhere, and everyone is an innovator. So even people coming to work and doing things in new and innovative ways, I'm excited to see those kinds of things. The last two are stay ahead of the curve, and that we do work off of volunteerism. So that's a really big deal. I don't have people's time. I have to work off of volunteerism.
Great. And that kind of ties right into the last point we have here, the last question. There's a lot of different ways that you can do emerging technology programs. Oftentimes companies bring the outside in, so they'll not engage employees in the process, but they'll just go out, find solutions, and then incorporate those in a top-down fashion in the organization. Why did Sargento feel like it was important to do the bottom-up or engaging employees in the emerging technology program?
Yeah, employee engagement is a really big thing at Sargento. It's really one of those kind of main pillars that guides us. If you think an idea is a good idea and you don't have too many people to sound it off of, how do you know that it's a really good, sustainable idea for a period of time? One of the things that we really liked about new and different ways of thinking, getting that kind of ingrained in the culture, is meeting people where they're at in their journey. And so what technology might be to me is different than what technology is to you. And ensuring that those people are being heard is the biggest thing that I can say is what we wanted to do with an innovation challenge. Some of the ideas that have come from our employees are just amazing. I'm still humbled by a lot of the ideas that we're still testing out today.
That's awesome. And actually going right off of that, let's take a deeper dive into what the emerging tech process actually looks like. So this is an overall visual of it. Mm-hmm. And Aslinn, you can speak to this. We're going to dive into each one of these sections, but what this is designed for, everyone in the room, if you go from the left side to the right side of the screen, we're looking at the first stage of the process, which is just starting to engage employees all the way through to, right? Sargento is a really robust program in terms of taking things through to a proof of concept, which is powered by Aslinn.
Some me, some the rest of the team. It takes a team to execute for sure. Yes.
Definitely. So Aslinn, anything that you want to throw in here? I know we're going to dive into each one of these sections a little bit deeper, but just from the get-go, anything that you wanted to highlight?
Well, the only one thing that I want to make sure to differentiate is that at Sargento, we are a food and beverage company. So there's a big distinction between the innovation that you see every day in our products and services versus the things that you would see as the innovation of emerging technology. And that's been one of the things that we've had to definitely promote and educate about within the organization as a whole. And just, I want to make sure that there's a distinction between those, the innovation for food and bev, and then the emerging technology innovation within IT.
Great. So what we're going to do now is go into each one of these sections. We're going to chunk them off into twos. So we're going to first talk about planning, promoting, and actually running what we call a challenge. And we'll give a little context to what a challenge is in just a moment. But then something really unique Sargento does, which is great, is actually involving employees in the process of once an idea is selected, going through and actually running testing and validating their idea that they came up with. Then from there, going into pitching leadership, my favorite part. And then finally, the last part will be prototyping and doing those actual proofs of concept. So for starting around planning, promoting, and running your challenge, just to provide a little background to what a challenge is, basically we do, so that you don't get ideas that are all over the board, and I know this is the first question, Aslinn here, but so you don't get ideas that are not related to areas of focus that you want to hone in on. What we do is focus on challenge statements, which are simply topics related to a strategic area of growth or priority for the organization. So with that, not to steal your thunder, Aslinn, but how did you ensure, off of that, like if you could go into understanding your pillars and some of the folks that you engaged up front in order to come up with your challenge statements, that would be great.
Yeah, so I do want to let everyone know that we've done 2 challenges at Sargento. So the first year we did a challenge that was just focused within IT. And the second year we did a challenge with IT and research and development. The first year, I would say we just did a simple kind of test, like throw a stone in the water and see what you get back. And it was a simple question: how can you save time at Sargento? Just a simple question. The next year, we got a little bit more complex. And with a lot of the conversations that I was having throughout the organization, it seemed like digitization was a disruptor that was happening all over the company. And so we posed the question to both R&D and IT, how can you give your customers a more Amazon-like experience? And the word customer was the one that was really, that was up to you. You could decide what customer was. Is that a person experiencing your downline work? Or if that was a person that was outside of the company experiencing, the people that we interface with every day.
Great. And kind of going off that, there's something I wanted to dive a little bit deeper into. You had mentioned between, the first and second challenge you did, going out and engaging some additional departments outside of IT. Could you just share your experience with some of the strategies that you used in order to go about going from IT outside?
Over the course of the year that we were doing the first implementation of the first proofs of concepts, it was a really organic relationship that you got to meet other people across the organization. One of those that we found a lot of synergy with was the research and development department. So we were meeting quarterly as it was to discuss any types of synergies around things that we were doing or exploring that might benefit research and development. And they were also giving us advice on, hey, if you get into these situations, this is kind of like what you can do, which was a really great partnership. And so I threw out the idea. The challenge did not start until September, so I threw out the idea in our July meeting, and they were like, "Sure, okay, we'll do that." And I think that they did not understand what they were accepting. They didn't understand maybe the level of what they wanted their employees to be in on, and so it was a really great experience for us to partner and get some transparency into R&D and what R&D does. I grew a lot of empathy for all of the different things that they do within Sargento, for sure. It was a great partnership.
Awesome. And kind of going off that, right, for it's looking at the overall, right, for both of the challenges that you've ran, how did you go about doing the promotion and the communication to staff to get them to participate?
I partnered with Ideawake. So that was a big part, is that we came up with like a wonderful presentation that would help tell the story, because storytellers are the people that really help bring things home. And they helped paint the picture of the beginning, middle, and end that needed to be there for people to buy in to what we were promoting. So I partnered with them to put together a presentation that was all telling of the whole process, the whole story. And I would go to either department meetings or organizational meetings, and I would get like 10 minutes on the agenda to promote the challenge. And then after that, the main mechanism that we used internally to communicate after the challenge was live was email. And I got to be honest, I got a lot better at drafting some really good emails with the help of Ideawake as well. So it was great to have the frameworks and then fill them into what I would call Sargentoize them to what our culture is, and help speak to those things that are important to us.
That's great insight. And to make sure that we want to focus on, make sure we get to the testing piece and really dive into that. So just quickly, Aslinn, if you had to choose the most important component, let's say maybe the most two important components of the planning process and the promotion process, what do you think it would be?
The first thing in the planning, I did not realize this at the beginning, but the question that you choose is truly one of the most important things that you put out there. I feel like that helps put tension on the relationship. Like if a person doesn't think that they can answer that question, that it's too far out of their realm, then they immediately disengage. So choosing the right question is really, really important. And then the second part is, I didn't realize that I was going to be a communications person, but it really helped the engagement piece of it. You really have to you plan a lot, and that period of time that you plan, you also have to take it up a level for when you are actually engaged in the challenge. So that extra effort is totally worth it though, because you get the engagement rates that you're looking for from the employees.
That's great. So, right, we ran these two challenges. One was around saving time
Yep.
reducing waste or inefficiency. The second one was around Amazon-like approach.
Mhm.
So we collect these ideas. Then after we collect them, just really quickly explaining the process of how we get to the selection. So there's going to be commenting and voting on the ideas from frontline employees. And that's like an awesome component of this and making the process transparent. But leading into the second phase of it, we start talking about how do we go through selecting the ideas that we've received.
Yeah.
So Aslinn, if you just want to touch on this, coming out with the selection criteria and how like the ideas initially were shortlisted, but then what the criteria maybe were, if you can share that, and what they were going to be getting into after getting the idea selected.
Yeah, so one thing that I'll mention is that I have a group that kind of governs the emerging technology program, just to make sure we're not going off the rails, just to make sure that we're cross-disciplinary thinking about the solutions that we provide. And that's called the IT Advisory Committee. And it's a great group of cross-functional folks across Sargento's different disciplines and different departments. And one of the things that they hold me to as the emerging tech architect when I put ideas out there are four core values, and they hold true, and they're pretty repeatable. So the value, what is the value of the idea? In general, this is kind of helping build like a very generic business case. How much are you going to save by doing this? How much like time are you going to save, money, whatever have you? Then there has to be a direct correlation to the strategic alignment of the overarching goals that guide Sargento as a company. Then there needs to be the feasibility. Can we do this? Asking yourself the question. And then finally, the sustainability. For how long can we do this? Those are the four criteria that are guiding the emerging tech program. And those are the same ones that we use in the innovation challenge to judge the ideas. And I think that they're going to hold true for a long time, because they're pretty tried and true value metrics.
Awesome. And kind of going off that, right? We go through and you did the evaluation of the ideas. You met with your council and we came up with this, the selection criteria and selected them. And this, I think the next phase here really ties into what folks define as a culture of innovation, at least from what we've seen. But what was, the next step, Aslinn, after these ideas were selected?
Yeah, so after the ideas were selected, then we got into meeting with the Ideawake team on site for the idea boxes. And they were silver idea boxes that when you open them had a bunch of different, like things that would probably help you jot down ideas and things like that. So there was a little bit of papers that help set up the idea of what an entrepreneur would probably go through, like looking at your total addressable market, looking at your personas of the customers that you're serving, help put together a real business case with tangibles like numbers that are, transfixed for some point of reference. And then, and that was something that we did over 4 weeks before we did the big presentation for the Shark Tank. And just to mention, I just want to let people know that the way that we do this, the Shark Tank idea was actually an employee's idea to have this as the final presentation. So.
And I can't wait to get into the Shark Tank. That's my personal favorite part about this whole thing. But kind of going into the testing that the team members did, and really what made this special once again was instead of just handing this off to somebody in a business unit to implement, and maybe the idea falling into a black hole. What Sargento does really well is really let the employee drive the idea that they submitted up to a certain point and actually have the opportunity to pitch it to the leadership team, all the way up to the actual CEO of the company. So really cool. But Aslinn, anything else you want to highlight on like the learnings of what employees went through?
Yeah, I think that one of the really great things is that, all companies can have them. It's not like a bad thing, but there's definitely silos that happen within a corporation. And some of the ideas that people had, they were very courageous to put them out there because these were ideas that were cross-disciplinary or completely in a discipline that somebody might not know very much about. And there was a lot of empathy that was experienced from meeting with marketing or meeting with the strategic insights group and finding out what they know, what they don't know, or had they thought about this idea in the past. And that was really great because members of IT got to know things about different parts of the company as well as R&D. It was a really great experience to break down some of those silos and build those relationships and learn a lot about different parts of the company.
That's great. And like, how did you see employees personally grow over the 4-week program?
Yeah. So there was so much growth. I actually kind of get emotional when I think about this because I was asking, I didn't realize what I was asking of these employees to come and put together like what a entrepreneur would have as a pitch deck at the end of this time. And they did it in 4 weeks, just 4 simple weeks of meeting with the Ideawake team. And I would say that the biggest thing that I saw them do was they really might be a scientist and they flipped over and they were a business person. And it just blew my mind how well that they could like wear that hat. And another thing is that someone had already thought through the whole process of vendor selection and project management and things of that sort. And these are people that's not what they do. That's not what they do at all. Those were the big growths that I saw out of 2 members specifically that were in the cohort that went forward in the Idea Box program. It was really nice to see.
That's great. So, going into the Shark Tank itself now, so, teams went through, they did 4 weeks of testing. They went out and interviewed customers, validated some assumptions, that the problem existed, that the solution they had solved the problem. And that the problem was big enough that it could have a significant impact on Sargento. So then they put together that pitch deck, like you mentioned. It's a very rapid program, right? But looking at the pitches themselves, how do you tell us about the environment of that? And I think once again, it is the most special part about your program is like just that event and just how many people are there. I'm going to let you tell.
So it was an idea from somebody in engineering that we met with in 2018 that was like, oh my gosh, this so sounds like the ABC program Shark Tank. Why don't you go ahead and do it that way? Well, one of the things that I kind of took under my wing is that I actually compare the executive sponsor, who I ask to be one of the people that take these ideas forward and give some financial benefit to the winner. I parallel them to one of the ABC stars. So, like our CEO, you can compare him to Robert Hajarvik, and you can, I might have butchered that name, so I apologize if I have. But I parallel them to those stars, and I do like a really big introduction when you're welcoming the sharks onto the stage. And we actually set it up in the largest room that we have at Sargento. Hosts about 100 and fire regulations 120 people, and they are facing there's some big chairs that are facing the presenters, and there's a big screen up there so everybody can see the presentation. And it's a pretty big, well orchestrated event. And I would say that each presenter gets about 10 minutes to do their pitch, and we try to do this over like an hour to keep it maybe over a lunch hour or something, so we're not digging into people's productivity time. And they just did it without a hitch. They one after another got up there, did their presentation. The judges, though, that's one of the big things that we don't know, and you have to kind of coach them up about that, is that this is the C-level staff of a major company, and they could ask some really big questions. And that's a very daunting thing to step into. So helping them coach over those obstacles and through that. If they don't know the answer to a question, hey, I'll get back to you. I'll let you know. But it's a really great event that took an immense amount of coordination, and I would do it over and over again. It was really great because there was a lot of smiles. There was a lot of really great energy in the room. And I think that the people that won the prize were a little bit kind of startled at the end of the experience. Like they didn't know what they had won, which was a little surprising because you tell them pretty often throughout the thing, like, you will take this forward and you will prototype it. And they get to the end and they're like, oh, like now the work begins? Oh, okay.
Definitely. Like that actually ties to, I think, the optics, right, of this are great, and it's building like a really awesome enabling event that you have the largest room in Sargento, and there's a lot of people that attend this. I think the room, basically was full. Both of the ones that have, we've done. And the more important piece, so the optics are great, and it's great to, have that engagement piece. But like you said, what happens next, and making sure that we go into prototyping and actually running those proofs of concept, once again, a lot powered by Aslinn, is one of the most critical parts. Having the optics right without the execution isn't going to produce the results that you want. So, going off that, though, the leadership reception, how many ideas have entered into the actual prototyping phase that made it to the pitch?
So there's been 8 total that have made it from into the Shark Tank. 4 in 2018 and then 4 in 2019. And so we have finished all but one of all the 2018 proofs of concepts, and all of the proof of concepts for 2019 are being executed right now.
That's great. And this is just, I wanted to make sure we highlighted the folks from the last Emerging Tech Challenge that won the Shark Tank.
Yeah.
So now where the rubber meets the road, running the actual prototyping and proofs of concepts. After the ideas were selected by the Sharks, you had just started to, touch on it, Aslinn, but you want to do a deeper dive into, this is where a lot of people end up faltering, I think, that have tried running these programs or thinking about running them. So what have you done, right, to find success in terms of running those proofs of concept and prototypes?
Yeah, so you have a lot of conversations around a company, and you get to know like maybe what somebody else has done similar to this, or what somebody has tried to do and maybe hasn't come to fruition of what people wanted it to be. And I learned that pretty quick at Sargento, that some people had thought about the emerging tech program as something that you would throw it over the wall and then it would be, under the protection of the emerging tech program until it came to fruition. So in 2020, I decided to concentrate the emerging tech program on execution. And so what happens next is the answer here. What we do is we take it forward by not doing an exhaustive research of the vendor selection, but really analyzing the idea. We set the problem statement, we set the solution, what we're looking for, and then we look to meet with the executive sponsor and align with the idea originator, myself, and the executive sponsor, and figure out what the next path forward is. Sometimes there's a little bit of adjustment in between what the executive sponsor is looking for and what the idea originator originally pitched. So there's a little bit of tuning to the problem and the solution statement, and then you get to work. You reach out to vendors, you do research, you meet with people across the organization. I definitely think that diversification of thought and diversification of input is really important for getting the best solutions and the best outcomes. So there's a lot of meetings that happen, and one really big thing is I actually write up like all of the people's different involvement from across the organization. If there's a subject matter expert that I need maybe a half hour or an hour of their time during the execute phase of the project, I mark out the months that the execute phase is going to be, who the subject matter expert is, and how many hours I will need that person to consult with me on this for the success of the project. So that's a little bit what I do in project management. And along the way, the idea originator is the one guiding and shaping the thesis of the overall proof of concept. So it's nice to keep them involved. I just coach from behind.
That's great. And I think Aslinn, I think we might have brushed over this a little bit, but the piece of like, right, why it's a Shark Tank pitch at the end of the day is one of the senior leaders, right, in order for the idea to progress, has to sponsor it, right?
Yes, yes. In order for an executive sponsor has to be involved from the beginning, because there needs to be a certain level of transparency from the top down. If you're going to involve a bunch of employees that are in, for instance, HR, then it's really important that that executive knows and that they're given the opportunity to participate, and that they don't have to worry about, hey, have you cleared this with my manager? Hey, do I have enough time in my day to do this? It really clears up a lot of that, and having that executive sponsorship is key.
And just the high level buy-in too. That's where you can make, because a lot of folks, prior thinking, how do you get the buy-in? And really it's that enabling event, right, of involving the leadership and actually sponsoring and choosing the idea they want to sponsor, if any.
Yep.
Going into some more tactical stuff now. So looking at scoping out proofs of concept, what do you do in order to, do the scoping of it around, validating assumptions? And then how do you do that without spending excessive time and resources on it?
It's not an easy thing to do. I have kind of 3 core rules that I use, and I'm pretty staunch about them. It's getting harder to hold true to them, but I would say that one of the big things that we do is we are very intent on putting that problem statement together. What are you actually trying to achieve here is the ultimate objective of the proof of concept, and then putting a solution. And around that solution, there are actually KPIs, or success metrics, as we call them, that we outline in the proof of concept itself. We pay for our proofs of concepts. We do not look to do them for free. I know that that's a lot of kind of getting into a little bit nitty gritty, but we actually pay for the proofs of concepts in order to make sure that you hold that space for an indeterminate outcome. And that's what experiential learning is all about, is that we don't know if this is going to work. We're taking a chance on it. So I make sure to have the execute phase no longer than 90 days. Proofs of concepts have a budget of around $10,000, and that they are limited to 10 people. More than 10 people, just project management can kind of get a little bit difficult. So those are 3 of the core principles that I try to use in order to scope things out. And the way that we anchor ourselves is always going back to that problem statement. Are we still doing this problem statement, or is our scope creep happening more than we're aware of?
Mhm.
It might happen from time to time.
Yeah, time to time. And kind of going off that, what are some of the cool proofs of concept? I know you can't share all of them, but any ones that you can share that you'd like to highlight?
Um, One of them is it was very simple. It was the core question was, how can we save more time? Well, one of the people had meetings all the time. They were a project manager, and they said, it would be really great if we could have something that's built into our calendars that would make us set our calendars to, instead of 30-minute meetings, 25, and instead of 60-minute meetings, 50. And right at that time that we were doing this, Microsoft had released an upgrade that actually allowed you to do that. So we tested out with a group of project managers. The first round, we tested out a group of project managers. They set up their meetings to only be 50 minutes and 25 by default. And it really helped with contextual changing. So being able to change from one subject to the next without having, a little bit of foggy brain. And it also allowed them time to travel to meetings so that they weren't late. That was one of the proofs of concepts that we did. We also validated that with a sales group. The hard part about it that we found out is that you actually have to have a larger group than just one segregated group. You can't have just a control group. You have to have an organization that buys into that. And then the second one that we did, and this is one that didn't really match with our culture, we did an automatic timekeeping proof of concept. So you can go download any of them. There's one that is, I think it was called, I don't remember the name of it, but it automatically takes your time that you're doing and changing through different applications on your computer, and it does your time card for you so that you don't have to do it at the end of your day. It takes time away. And unfortunately, at the end of that, a lot of the people that participated as volunteers to test it out felt like it was more Big Brother than would have been culturally acceptable at Sargento. So a couple of those, the one proof of concept, meeting efficiencies, that one moved on, and it's, maybe we'll use it again when we post-COVID go back to the office, and that we need to have time to translate to get to our different areas. But the other timekeeping application, that one was not successful. It's kind of put on the virtual shelf at the moment until, it's not so Big Brother-esque as the volunteers told me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So other than that, what are the other benefits that you've seen from building a culture of innovation at Sargento thus far? I know it's still early on in the program. There's going to be a lot of great stuff coming out, but outside of the proofs of concept themselves,
Yeah.
what do you see as the benefits, either tangible or intangible?
I would say that there's a lot of them, but I'll try to hone in on a couple. There was a group of executives that went on a trip to Chicago to look around at some things that were, maybe big audacious goals that entrepreneurs were trying to tackle. And I would say that it was really great. It was a wonderful trip because it got people thinking in new and different ways. It got them asking questions instead of just accepting as things were, thinking about things from a different perspective and solving problems. And another thing is that when partnering with some of these different parts of the company, I think at first they meet with me and they think I'm out of my mind. How are you going to do this? But big audacious goal with only $10,000 and things like that. Well, taking them and trying to lead them and coach them through that process and help. It's a bilateral relationship by all means. I'm also learning, and I'm also humbled by many of the things that I've learned as well. But I think that when you get into a relationship with them, they'll come to you and they'll have tons of ideas. They'll be like, hey, I just have an idea for emerging tech. I just want to throw this in the hopper. And that's, those are the people that are the skeptics in the beginning. And they come to be like your biggest allies after all. They're like, oh yeah, you don't know about the emerging tech program. You need to, you need to go talk to them, and they can help you out with those really great ideas. Sometimes I've heard some pretty great ideas just recently, actually, on a couple of phone calls.
Awesome. And I think we're going to cover this in the next slide some, but just this really does highlight, everybody wants to go from, from what we've seen, everybody wants to release the next, MacBook Pro or the next iPad-like or iPhone-like application. And, that's the expectation sometimes that's set when you're thinking about these types of programs. And really what we've found is that's like a really quick way to set yourself up for failure a lot of the time. So we call it a walk, run, scale. And so where you start is, what are the ideas that you can get across the finish line that are going to show some type of, value, whether financial or not financial, based upon leadership's goals and based upon your department's goals or, your charter for your program. And then from there, you build the buy-in over time. And just as Aslinn had highlighted, right, you slowly but surely start to expand the program out. So you go from 1 department to 3 departments, to 5 departments, and then company-wide. Same with like the complexity of the types of projects that move through your program. They start simple, right, in year 1, even going sometimes into year 2, but then they start to get more and more complex because you have buy-in from leadership and you have visibility to the CEO of the company who's sponsoring projects going through the program. So going off that, looking at some of the obstacles learning and putting advice into action, don't want to make sure we leave folks with some, tactile advice on, first, Aslinn, looking at what were some of the obstacles you had to overcome throughout, the overall life cycle from the upfront planning all the way through to implementing the proofs of concepts.
This is kind of a hard one because I think that there's a lot, but I'll try to kind of consolidate. One of the things, to your point, to lead off of that, sometimes I actually don't even start walk, jog, run. I start crawl, walk, maybe jog. And I do kind of sometimes make sure that people understand how small of scale of proofs of concepts that we do. I actually put them as sometimes not 1.0, I put them as like 0.1. So that people really understand we're really starting out with the smallest test possible and putting one foot in front of the other. But I think that having some of the things that have been the obstacles that we've had to overcome is sometimes partnering with other parts of the organization. They might be at a different part or a different phase or something like that. And so doing the proof of concept on the time scale that I have really kind of doesn't mesh really well. The other thing that we had with putting a challenge through to delivering to the proofs of concepts is making sure that people have enough time in their schedule to dedicate to the project and that there's alignment from that, overarching manager or director and things like that. The having the time for the innovation challenge was one thing, but when you advance to the proof of concept, it's a little bit different. So ensuring you have that alignment. And then I would say that, the last one is really about creating that idea of pulling people back to the original, making sure that you don't have scope creep and making sure that you pull people back to that original problem statement, because wow, sometimes these proofs of concepts can take off on lives of their own. A couple of them have in good ways and in bad. Sometimes people across the organization really want to get involved and you have to hamper their excitement and make sure that you don't kill it, but that you make sure that you keep them involved and maybe educate them about what's happening. But keep your rules in line. Make sure that you always it's a courageous effort to keep those rules that I have in first view, but make sure that you pay for a proof of concept. Make sure the execute phase is 90 days. Try to keep to the budget, and then make sure to involve no more than 10 people.
Great. And we're down to about 15 minutes. I want to make sure we have 10 minutes for Q&A.
Yeah.
So just keep that in the back of your mind. Both you and I can talk innovation all day, right? So what has been, would you say, Aslinn, the most fulfilling part of this journey in building a culture of innovation at Sargento?
I would have to say I go back to it every time. I was so humbled when so we went through the innovation challenge. Really great coaching from Ideawake. It was beyond what I had thought was going to be possible. You know, we had over like 100 comments. We had great participation rates. And when the participants, the 4 winners of the Silverbox program went and did their presentations, I was just startled to know what can really happen when you put a goal in front of yourself and you obtain it. I feel like those people, those participants, I set a really audacious goal. I think I stressed them out a little bit. That's one thing that I learned, that I'd probably go back and do that over 8 weeks, not 4 weeks. But I'm still humbled by what they showed up with and how amazing of presentations they did in front of our CEO staff. Just, that's not something that they normally do. That's not something that, you know, they do on a normal basis. And they just showed up like they had been doing it all their lives. Just really great. They dug in and they did the work. And when they did the work, that's what made it such a great event.
It's great. And I think you might have already kind of dove right into this one, but knowing what you know now, what's, you know, one piece of advice that you would give to some of the folks in the audience today?
I'd give a couple. It's a really courageous thing for an employee to go out there and post an idea, especially when they have to work with these people all the time and whatnot. So making sure that one thing that we might be looking at is making sure that if you don't have a culture of innovation or things like that and you're just starting, make sure that you maybe host some office hours in order to get people thinking in new and different ways. That could be something that I would say might be helpful. And then the other thing is don't stress out your employees that do want to do this extra work. They're willing to dig in, but maybe not as much as you are. And that setting the goal of 4 weeks after the initial phase of the innovation challenge to get to the Shark Tank was really audacious. And I would probably do it over 6 or 8 weeks in order to let them finish the work and have that finished product of an entrepreneur deck, pitch deck ready.
Great stuff. So before we go into Q&A, any other actual first steps that you want to suggest for folks in the audience on how they can get started with building a culture of innovation, or, you know, an emerging technology program with their organizations?
I think they're in line with kind of the principles that we started at the beginning, but like starting small and growing your network, like getting in line with maybe if you're a culture of innovation and things like that. Generally, when I think of that, I think of entrepreneurs. Entrepreneurs are really great to partner with, and just they're always up for the challenge, and they think in new and different ways. And I think that they sometimes have that out of box thinking. So maybe grow your network in that way and start small, but think big. I would say that you can do a lot with a little. So grow a budget. If you know you really want to try things out, grow a budget that you could do some experiential learning, but really make sure that it's important to foster that idea that things might not work out. Holding that space for things not to work out is really important in that experiential learning. Sometimes I think that we're, as people, ingrained in making things successful, and that gets a little bit hard and it gets a little bit tricky when you get into the actual steps. And then one of the last things, 2 things that I'll say is that diverse groups equal diverse input, which equals better outcomes. So make sure that if you are fostering that innovation, you're taking it's from the people and from across the company. Their input matters. And then last, that executive sponsorship is absolutely key for getting these proofs of concepts to fruition and getting them top of mind from the executive staff, solving whatever problem that is the thesis of that proof of concept. Yeah.
Great. And kind of, just to like drive that one really, you know, home, having that leadership buy-in and really thinking about not just having leadership be supportive of the program when at the outset of it, but how do you get leadership involved in actively sponsoring ideas? And that goes back to the Shark Tank piece of this, and really why it's great from an engagement standpoint, because you have the C-suite out there, right? Any employee had the opportunity, right, within IT originally, and then in the expanded departments, to pitch their idea and have, like, you know, go through this program, and then they actually get to pitch the C-suite, which is really, really special, which is why we had a full room of people. But by having that C-suite there and them actively sponsoring projects, that helps, I think, clear a lot of the roadblocks as you try to go from 0 to 1, crawl to walk, walk to run, insert the analogy that you want to. Going through
Point
the
one, yeah.
where you, you know, where you are, or, you know, from starting to where you ultimately want to be when you think about, you know, building, right, the next iPad or iPhone. So with that, we're going to open it up for questions. I think we have about 10 minutes left. We're at 2:50 right on the dot. So we have a few that are up here already. So one of them, Aslinn, is what key emerging technologies are on Sargento's radar?
There's a lot. So of course, the one that was really, really hot, like 2018, 2019 was AI, and how can we take advantage of AI? We do some really cool tech talks at Sargento that actually expose the technologies to the company. And so we've done a tech talk on AI. We did some tech talk on collaboration and what is new and different in collaboration. The most recent one, pre-COVID, was augmented reality and virtual reality, which was great because it wasn't really a talk. We got people involved and they got to test it out. They got to have some HoloLens and some people that showed up with the actual technology so that they could try it out. It was really cool. It was really great.
Mm-hmm. I'm going to save the second part of this question for last, actually, but going into a couple of other questions here. So are Sargento's emerging technology efforts focused exclusively on addressing internal operational challenges?
No, I wouldn't say that. I would say that right now we are looking for a true business case and a true business reason. It could be we are more internally focused at with what we've been working with, but we're still open to looking externally and trying to solve external problems as well.
Great. Got a couple more here. So are you looking at emerging technologies and the impact they might have on your external partners? So as an example, distributors, retailers, and consumers as well.
I'm not as focused on that, but I do try to pay attention to it. Most oftentimes, so for instance, there's an email that circulates about like the consumers, like what are consumers doing? How are their buying habits changing? And so making sure to pay attention to all of the business aspects is really important, because if you're not paying attention to it, you could blindside yourself with a proof of concept. That actually has happened, where we were working on a proof of concept and it just didn't fit. And so we ended up stopping. But I would say that we do pay attention to how things are affecting downstream vendors and people that contribute to our business. Yes.
Great. And I don't think we did actually cover this to the individual who asked this, but at the one of the participants would be interested to know how ideas that are not selected for the Silverbox are handled. So the ones that don't make it through the leadership, you know, the initial leadership evaluation going into the Silverbox.
Mm-hmm. It depends. It depends on what their score was. So if the score was a certain level, they would probably get put into what's called my backlog. And then that would go through the traditional process. So my ideas, things that I come up with and talk to to different stakeholders and things like that, I actually put them in front of the IT Advisory Council, and they vote on them just through the Ideawake platform as well. And then we score them that way. So there's a second chance for them to be seen again. But what happens in the second phase is that I actually put like a business case around it, research some vendors, and kind of tighten up the overall case itself before putting it in front of the IT Advisory Council.
Mm-hmm. And the other piece off of that too is, you know, even if it doesn't get put into your backlog, the having radical somebody just said this the other day. I think I'm gonna, reuse it quite a bit. Like radical transparency. One of the reasons that these programs themselves don't produce higher engagement long term is because of the lack of transparency of understanding where ideas are going and why. And so, the ability to communicate, whether it's using a platform or whether it's doing it in an Excel spreadsheet, making sure that you're taking the time, regardless of the medium that you're using, to communicate with employees where their ideas are going and closing the feedback loop. From what we found in the data, people care a lot more about hearing, if they put something in, why it isn't moving forward versus the fact that it is moving forward. Say that a different way. People don't care as much about the fact that their idea gets implemented or not. It'd be great if it did. They prefer it did versus not. But it's more important to know why something didn't happen versus just having it go into a black hole.
Good input.
Thank you. And this one, I know this is going into, I'm sure that a lot of people have this question. I know we can't really get into it right now, but giving examples of some other successful, like pending implementations or implementations happening now and the ROI they've provided. So I know we can't,
yeah, I wish I could get into that, but I can't. I so badly want to, but I can't.
Just know they exist.
They do. There's more. Yeah, just I think that for the purposes of being a privately held company, we're going to have to hold that a little closer than I'd like.
It's all good. So, and let's see, are there anybody else have questions that they want to ask? I think we just cycled through most of them. We're almost at time. So, well, I'll keep watching this for a minute, but I just wanted to thank everybody again for coming. We recorded this session, so we'll make sure to share it with everybody. And, if you are interested in having a follow-up conversation or have follow-up questions for Aslinn, just please reach out to us and, we can forward those on to her or put you in contact if it makes sense with her directly. And then for anybody that, is kind of thinking about how to get a program started or how to actually do the innovation process, more than happy to have, a candid conversation with you about what that looks like and, what it takes to get one of these types of programs off the ground. So with that, I want to thank everybody again for taking the time to join us today. And with that, we'll give it another minute here for anyone to ask a question, and then we'll close out. Any closing remarks you want to add in, Aslinn?
Yeah, I just wanted to thank everybody for such great questions. And thank you to Ideawake for preparing for this and for the opportunity to present and tell the story of Sargento's innovation in our emerging technology program. Thank you all very much.
It was our pleasure.
Great hour.
Yes. Thank you, everybody. And thank you for, I think everybody stayed pretty much like the entire time. So I think it was engaging and hopefully it was helpful to everyone. So with that, hope everybody has a great rest of your week. And look forward to sharing this with you and then some other resources, around building out these programs. Thanks, everybody.
Take care. Bye-bye.